Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the Brain Injury Association presentation. And we're actually here with our partner at Extend a Family. And I'm happy to say that we have Christine Strong with us. Christine is actually the eligibility and training specialist at the Grand River Transit at the region of Waterloo. And she's going to bring us through the application program process as well as eligibility process and so on for Mobility Plus and explain what all that is and also some other programs that are available for there. So I'd like to thank Trina at Extend a Family for inviting us to their location. We also have a few people here in person who will be asking questions as we go as well. We will be recording, but your likeness will not be shown on the recording as we will close that part of it there. And at the end, when we start questions, we will stop the recording. And Emily Singh is actually going to be facilitating the Zoom portion of it. So here's Emily.
Great, thank you.
And thank you, Christine. If you'd like to get started, we'll pass this off to you. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you, everybody. So if you don't mind turning your volume down, so many computers in one room. I've unmuted myself, so hopefully you can hear me as best you can there over the Zoom. I'm probably going to stand up and talk to the room that is here, so don't mind me if you see me in the corner of my screen. I'm still sharing all the information. I am just going to pop up my screen. Can everyone see what I'm sharing there? Yes, Emily, good? Okay, perfect. So I will get started. Like was mentioned, I work for the region of Waterloo at Grand River Transit as an eligibility and training specialist. So my role actually encompasses a few different things. A large part of it is reviewing Mobility Plus applications. So I'm well equipped to talk about that process and what it looks like, as well as our eligibility criteria. The other part of my job is actually travel training in the community. So I do presentations to community groups, and I also work one-on-one and with small groups to do in-person on the bus training to help people learn the conventional system, which is our big bus, our regular bus, and Ion train. So I work with the accessible programming. I also help people learn the regular system. So I'm well equipped to answer any questions people have about either. As far as today goes, I've been asked to do a good overview of the Mobility Plus program. So like I said, I'll talk about the application process, eligibility criteria, and I'll give you an overview of the programs and services that are available to you if you've been approved. I'm also going to talk a little bit about fares and the affordable transit program, and then I'm happy to discuss any questions that people might have. Like we mentioned, we'll try to save them till the end. Maybe I'll answer it within the presentation. If not, hold on to it, and I have lots of information to share. Before I get started, I also like to just differentiate some definitions for people that sometimes slip into my presentations because this is how we describe things at GRT, and I want to make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. So when I refer to conventional transit, this is just the transit word for it. I don't know why they call it that. When I call conventional transit, I'm just referring to the regular buses, or as I like to call them, the big buses, because specialized transit is regular too. I'm referring to the big buses and the Ion train. If I'm talking about specialized transit, I am referring to Mobility Plus, which is our accessible transportation program in Waterloo region. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm just going to call it Mobility Plus. Okay. So like I said, Mobility Plus is our accessible door-to-door transportation service. Some of you might recognize this small white bus that you've seen around the region. This is the bus that provides our main door-to-door service. So a little bit different than the conventional system or the big bus in the sense that it picks you up right at your door and takes you directly to your destination. So there's no wayfinding involved. The driver can assist you getting from your accessible door to the vehicle. A little bit of extra support that way. And it's fully accessible, the vehicle, whether you're using a mobility aid or, like I said, struggle with wayfinding or anything like that. This is an accessible service. It is still a shared ride service. So just like the conventional system, you are riding the bus with other people, even though it's picking you up directly. That's what makes it different from like a taxi ride or something like that. you're still seeing other people on the bus, and you still have to ride it long enough that they get to their destinations as well. So as much as it is taking you directly from one place to another, that doesn't mean that that's the only stop it's going to make. It may have stops along the way. So that's important to remember as well. The application process consists of two parts. So I have actually some paper applications with me just to illustrate. The first part of the application is called the Mobility Plus application, and that is filled out by the individual who wants to receive service. It can also be filled out by their caregiver or a representative of their choosing. So there's a part in the application where you can actually say, I want someone else to fill this out on my behalf. Here's who that person is, and you can name and identify them. You can also choose where you want your mail to go. So for example, let's say it's very difficult for you to receive mail at your home location because your mailbox is really far away and you always just pick it up at your friend's house. You could actually identify that you'd like your mail to be delivered to your representative's address instead of your own. That is an option that's provided. The second part of the application, part B, is filled out by a healthcare professional. So we generally say that this needs to be a registered healthcare professional, which means that it could be a doctor, but it doesn't have to be a doctor. It could be a physician. It could also be a social worker, a physiotherapist. We also accept managers of approved day programs as well, and other professionals in the region as we see fit. So if you're ever unsure about whether or not a professional that you have a connection with who knows about your disability and understands you, if you want to know if they would be approved, just contact us and we can let you know whether or not they would be eligible to fill out the form for you. I always just like to make sure that people know it doesn't have to be a family doctor. You do have other options as well. Now, in order for your Mobility Plus application to be considered complete, we do need both parts of the application. So your part or your representative and your healthcare professional's part have to be together in order for your application to be considered complete. Once we have both parts of the application, you can submit it online. You can submit it in person, by mail, or via email. So we try to make it as accessible as possible by giving people lots of options. To get the application, you can also apply online. You can call us and we'll mail you a paper copy of the form. You can print it off online. Same thing for your doctors. The forms can be printed online. Your doctor or your healthcare professional can also fill it out online. Lots of options as to how to both receive and submit the application. Once we have both parts, we ask for a 14-day review period. Now, this is 14 calendar days, not business days, so just 2 weeks. And what that actually is that's the time frame that we're mandated to review the application within by the AODA. The AODA is the Accessibility Accessibility of Ontarians with Disabilities Act. So that's the legislation that dictates how accessible transit should operate. So that's who tells us you have to get this done within 2 weeks. Now, the reality is we always do. We always get it done within 2 weeks. If you have applied and you haven't heard from us, what normally takes the longest is that we send our approvals in the mail. So once you're approved, we'll send you a welcome package with all of the paper documentation that you would need to book a ride so that you can keep that on hand. But we put that in the mail with Canada Post. So sometimes Canada Post does take a little bit of time. So if you've applied and you haven't heard from us in 2 weeks, just give us a call. The 99% of the time, you're all set to go. You're ready to start using services. You just need the information as to how to call and book. And we're happy to provide that in other formats as well if it's taking a long time to receive your package in the mail. So I always like to let people know that as well. When it comes to eligibility, there's two different types of criteria that we look at when we're determining eligibility for Mobility Plus. The first one is the presence of a disability, just in general. Presence of a disability. And I was explaining, I'm sorry, your name again, Kelly. I was explaining to Kelly earlier, there's a big misconception around this because less than 10 years ago, it used to be that accessible transportation would only consider physical disabilities. It wasn't until 2017 that the AODA, that legislation I was referring to, changed to say that we had to consider any type of disability. So today we consider physical disabilities, but we also consider mental health disability, cognitive disabilities, developmental disabilities, sensory disabilities, and medical disabilities, or other. So it doesn't have to be strictly physical. And in fact, we support a lot of people who have no physical disabilities at all, but find barriers to accessing conventional transit otherwise. And that's our second criteria for eligibility. Our second criteria is that barrier to accessing conventional transit. Now, the reason that there's two of them is because there are lots of people who have disabilities who can use the regular bus. There are lots of people who have developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, who can use the regular bus and the ion train all the time with little to no issues. So we recognize that just because you have a disability doesn't mean you can't use conventional transit. However, you might have a disability and face barriers to accessing conventional transit, which requires the need to have something more accessible. These barriers, though, again, don't have to just be physical. So it could be a physical barrier, like it's very difficult for me to use a mobility aid in the winter or something like that. It could also be an environmental barrier. So let's say when the bus is full, I can't stand up if I don't have a seat. I'm not able to ride the bus if I can't have a seat. Or I have a sensory condition where the stimulation of the environment when it's completely crowded is so overwhelming that I can't tolerate it. And I'm not able to stay on the bus long enough to complete my trip successfully. It could be a wayfinding barrier. So it could be, I can get to the bus closest to my house because it's right there. But when I have to transfer and I'm not at a station, I don't know how to navigate in these subdivisions. I don't know how to use Google Maps, or even little things like Google Maps is not always very accessible. I'm sure we know that. Little things like maybe you can read a map, but it's not orienting the right direction so that you're standing in the same way it's oriented. I struggle with that all the time. Little things like that is also a barrier to accessing conventional transit. So those are the two things we look for: the presence of a disability and some type of barrier to accessing the regular system, the big bus and the ion train. Now, if you are approved for Mobility Plus, we have three different types of approval periods. We have unconditional, temporary, and seasonal. And they're all a little bit different. So I'll actually start from the bottom up. Seasonal would be barriers to accessing transit based on weather, essentially, primarily winter-based weather. So for example, someone who is perfectly fine using transit in the summer, but as soon as we have a winter, like we did this year, where none of the sidewalks were cleared and there was ice and snow everywhere, then they couldn't use it at all because they were unable to navigate the environment with that specific weather type. So they might be approved for Mobility Plus just in the summer, so that they can, or sorry, just in the winter, so that they can use it for the duration of the winter when they face those barriers. But otherwise, they're good to go. And in the summer, they'll use our conventional service. A temporary person, there's two different reasons someone might be temporary. And I like to make sure that people are aware when I say a temporary approval, we are not saying that your disability is temporary. What we're looking for is the barriers to accessing transit. Is that temporary? So for example, someone who has a mental health condition at a point in their life when they're struggling, they might find barriers to accessing conventional transit due to anxiety or agoraphobia or something like that. But that doesn't mean that they're going to feel that way forever. It doesn't mean that with treatment or medication or anything like that, perhaps in a few years' time, they're perfectly able to use conventional transit. It's not, even though it may be a lifelong condition, they may identify with their diagnosis for a long period of time. The barriers that they're facing may not last forever. So in that case, we might provide them a temporary approval, even for a few years. So like 3 years, maybe a long term, to give them that time to, find things that work for them and that sort of thing. But we recognize that there could be changes to their capacity. Another temporary category would be you break your leg, or you're having hip surgery or something like that, and you've suddenly had a temporary disability that you will recover from, but in the meantime, you need support accessing transit. That's another reason we might be approved on a temporary basis. An unconditional approval is where your disability is permanent and your capacity to navigate transit will also remain the same. So this might be someone who has a permanent physical disability, perhaps someone who uses a wheelchair and has a disability that is not going to change. They're going to use the wheelchair for the rest of their life. We don't want to make them constantly have to reapply or renew services when we know that nothing's going to change in their situation and they're going to need these services for the duration of their life. So in that case, we would give them approval for unconditionally, which means that they don't have to reapply. And I just want to clarify, even if you do get a temporary approval, renewing services is very easy. You don't have to resubmit anything. You don't have to get new documentation. All you have to do is call us and say, hey, I would like to renew services. I'm still benefiting from it for this reason, or this is what's changed for me. I want to continue using services, and we'll extend them. So I want to make sure people know it's not a big barrier process to renew services. It's quite easy to do. When you're approved for Mobility Plus services, you have 3 different things that you are approved for. The first one is our door-to-door service, which I've talked about earlier, but I'll describe in more detail. You're also eligible for something called taxi coupons, and then free fare on conventional transit. Now, I should say, because I don't know, and just for reference, do you have any members that live outside of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge, like in the townships?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I just want to mention that Mobility Plus is specifically for people who live within the Tri-Cities. So Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. There is an accessible transportation service that services the townships. It's called Kiwanis Transit, but it is separate from Mobility Plus. So they have their own process for application and approval. And they don't offer the same services that we do. So I just want to mention that because it is different depending if you live in the township or in the city. Okay? And I'm happy to answer more questions about that later. So for the door-to-door service, that's that small white bus that I showed you earlier in the presentation that picks you up directly at your door and takes you directly to your destination. You can book rides up to 7 days in advance. You can technically book rides all the way up to same day. However, ride availability is first come, first served. So you're much more likely to get the rides that you're looking for the earlier that you book. So I always recommend trying to at least book 7 days in advance. I have heard that there has been some struggles with ride availability in recent times. So I'm happy to address that. I heard we had some current customers that may want to discuss that later, and I'm happy to do so. You can book your rides online or over the phone. So depending on what is most accessible to you and what you're most comfortable with. And we do also have something called subscription trips. So this would be, since you have to book each ride that you take, let's say you attend a program or you're doing a class or something like that, and it takes place at the same time on the same day of the week every single week. Instead of having to call every single week and book the same trip over and over and over, you can ask for what's called a subscription trip. And that's where one time they'll book you many recurring trips for that time frame, however long you need them for. So you can set an end date. You could say, hey, I'm taking a 12-week class at the community center. This is what time it runs. Can you book me a trip for the next 12 weeks? And they could do that, or it could be indefinite. So for example, we have a lot of dialysis patients who use subscription trips to get to their dialysis appointments, and those would just be indefinitely. There's no end date to them at all. Subscription trips as well are also based on availability. So you might not get them right away, but we will put you on a wait list and try to accommodate you as best we can. The reason that there's a wait list for subscription trips is because of the, let's say 100% trips that we book, we can only book a percentage of them as subscriptions because we want to make sure that there's still availability left for other people to book on-demand rides who don't have subscriptions but still need to go places. So we only book a percentage of our trips as subscriptions, which means that sometimes we're not able to accommodate everybody, especially if you want a subscription at a peak time. So this would be like the beginning and the end of the day for day programs or workplaces. Sunday mornings is also pretty popular for church services and that sort of stuff. So if you're trying to book a trip for those times, it sometimes does take a little longer before we can accommodate it. Now I have some pictures of what the online booking system looks like, but it just kind of describes how to use the service essentially. So things that you would need to provide when you're booking a trip, of course, the date that you would like to travel, where you would like to go. They'll ask you if you're using any mobility aids and if you have any additional passengers. Another common misconception of Mobility Plus is that you can't bring anyone with you. And that's not true. You actually can book the service with a guest. It doesn't have to be a support person. A guest would just mean that they also pay fare. So when you get on the bus and pay your fare, they would pay fare as well, but they can still accompany you. You just have to let us know when you book the ride so that we can make sure we leave space in the vehicle for them. We also have a support person program that you can apply for if you need assistance traveling on GRT. If you are approved for a support person program, the person accompanying you does not have to pay fare. Another option for booking rides is you can tell them two different ways to tell them what time you want to get there. So you can either say, I want to leave by this time, or I want to arrive by a certain time. So if you're just going to the mall and you don't care when you get there, say, hey, pick me up at 10. I want to sleep in. No problem. But if you have a doctor's appointment, you got to be there by a certain time. So you'll say, hey, I have to be there by 1 p.m. They'll make sure you get there by 1 p.m. Now, I do want to be honest, it does sometimes mean that you get there early because that's when they're able to accommodate the ride based on the very complicated scheduling they have to do since they have so many people that they're trying to organize rides for. So you might show up a little bit early, but you will get to your appointment on time. When you book a ride, you are also given what's called a half-hour pickup window. So what this means is because Mobility Plus is a shared ride service, because we're operating at the whims of traffic and all of those things like everybody else, we can't guarantee exactly when the bus is going to show up. We won't know exactly the minute that it's going to be there. So what we ask is that if we predict we're going to be there by 10:45, that you're ready for the 15 minutes before your pickup time, as well as the 15 minutes after. And that's what creates that half-hour pickup window. So if your pickup time is 10:45, we ask that you're available to be picked up from 10:30 to 11 at your accessible door, just in case the bus is a little bit early or a little bit late. And that way you're ready to go, and we're making sure that we can keep the service moving to do our other pickups and get you to your destination on time. We also have what's called a taxi coupon program. And what this is this would be different than a Mobility Plus ride. This would be if you were calling a taxi company to book a taxi ride on your own. So you would be calling one of the taxi companies in town. I think we work with all of them. We work with Golden Triangle, City Cabs, Waterloo Taxi, and United. So I think that's all of them. You would call the taxi company yourself and you would say, I'm a Mobility Plus customer. I would like to book a taxi ride using taxi coupons. They'll send you a taxi just like normal. You ride the taxi just like normal. They'll have the meter on, all of that sort of stuff. But when you go to pay your fare at the end, based on what's on the meter, you pay with the taxi coupons. So they come in a booklet of cash equivalent coupons. So it has $5, $2, and $1 denominations of coupons. And essentially you just take the coupons and pay the equivalent fare to what's on the meter. Now, what the benefit is for Mobility Plus customers is that each booklet has $60 worth of coupons. So you can get $60 worth of taxi rides out of one booklet, but when you buy them, you only pay $30. So it essentially works out to half price taxi fare because you're only paying half of what the taxi coupon booklet is worth. If that makes sense. Now, it does have some caveats. You can only buy a certain amount within a year. So you can buy up to 30 booklets within a calendar year. So from January to December, there's a limit of 30 books per customer. They also must be used within the Tri-Cities. So you can't use them to take out-of-town trips, and you can't use them to take trips to the townships. They have to be used within Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. And finally, Mobility Plus customers also get free fare on conventional services. So we recognize that for a lot of people, while they may need access to accessible transportation, there may be instances where riding the conventional service is accessible to them and makes more sense, right? And we want to encourage them to do so because it frees up our ride availability to get to other people. So for example, I know people who need Mobility Plus to get to new destinations, but places that they're really familiar with and they've ridden that bus over and over and over, they're happy to do that. That's no problem. They don't have to take Mobility Plus for that ride. So we're giving them the option to use conventional services for free. So what you would need to do in order to get this is get one of our EasyGo cards. That's the same bus pass that you would use to ride the conventional bus as a regular customer. And what we do is we essentially mark the card behind the scenes. It's an electronic flag, so it's all on our end. You won't be able to see it on your card. But when you tap it on the fare box, it'll know not to charge you anything. And in fact, you don't even have to have money on the card. You can just make sure it's registered to you as a Mobility Plus customer. And then when you tap it on the bus, it won't require any fare, and it will let the driver know that you're a Mobility Plus customer and you ride for free. So speaking of fares, I'll just talk briefly about the types of fare options that we have on Mobility Plus so people are aware. It's a little bit confusing because that bus pass I just referenced, that EasyGo card, that you can see the blue one here, that is not accepted on Mobility Plus buses. You have to have different fare in order to ride Mobility Plus. And even though conventional services are free when you're a Mobility Plus customer, you still have to pay to use the Mobility Plus service. So in order to ride a Mobility Plus, you can get paper tickets. One strip has 5 tickets and costs $15. And I just want to point out that this is the same cost as it would cost someone else to ride the regular bus and train. So we have fare parity, which means that it doesn't cost more to ride accessible transit. It costs $3 per ride, just like it would cost anyone else to ride the bus. You can also get a paper monthly pass if you use the service frequently. We also have a mobile app that was new in March of last year that you can use to pay your fare. You can buy these fare products at any customer service location, and you can also get them over the phone if you have a credit card, and we can mail products out to you. It's also worth mentioning that people can pick products up for you on your behalf. So you don't have to go yourself. If maybe the first time you're picking up tickets, it's not accessible for you to get there because you don't have the tickets to take the service yet. Someone else can pick them up on your behalf. All they need is your approval number. So when you get approved, you'll get an ID number, and that's all they need to provide in order to buy tickets on your behalf. There is something called the Affordable Transit Program. And now this program applies to both the conventional system and Mobility Plus. So it's for the big bus, trains, and Mobility Plus services. And what this is it's an household income-based discount program. So if you have a certain household income or below, you can be eligible for a 55% discount on Mobility Plus fare products or conventional services. Now, of course, if you're a Mobility Plus customer, you already get conventional services for free, so you don't have to worry about that, but you could apply it to your Mobility Plus tickets or monthly pass. Approval applies to your entire household. So because it's based on household income, whoever's in your household also is eligible. So this is important to note for people who have children under 18, because you have to be over 18 to apply for it. If you have teenagers or something like that and you want them to get the program, you would apply for it as their parent, list them as a dependent. They would count towards your household size, which dictates how much income is approved. And then they would be approved for the program as well. So like I said, you have to be over 18. You do have to live in the Waterloo region. You can't be a full-time post-secondary student because they already have access to discounted services. And again, based on household income. So you can apply for this online. I have brochures for this program as well, which gives you a lot more information. You can also apply for these in person at any of the community services welcome centers. So there's one in Waterloo, Kitchener, and Cambridge. Now, what's important to note is that if you are on OW or ODSP, applying for this program is very easy. If you are on ODSP, you are automatically eligible for this program. All you have to do is enter your ODSP member ID number. So you would go online, type in your basic information, put in your ODSP member ID number, and you would be approved. I have seen them approve people within a day. They're very fast usually because it's a very black and white program in the sense that you're either eligible or you're not. So it's very easy for them to sift through. So I always like to mention that because it's very quick if you're on ODSP and definitely worth applying. It makes a huge difference in the cost for fare products. If you're not on ODSP, you have to provide your proof of address to show that you live in the region, and then also proof of income. So this could be a CRA notice of assessment, but if that's not accessible to you, we've also accepted letters from social workers, I know people who have applied for this program who moved to Canada within the month and have none of this paperwork. So I know that they work with people. I know that they will try to find a way to help you apply for the program if you're unsure about documentation or anything like that. All right, and that's the material that I had for you today.